Good evening. Hi, I'm Dick Deming. I'm Medical Director of MercyOne Cancer Center and the founder of Above and Beyond Cancer. Welcome to our weekly cancer education series. It is brought to you in part with a grant from the Iowa Cancer Consortium. And I am really looking forward to this evening's conversation. We have with us as our guest, Dr. Alpa Patel. She is the Senior Vice President of Population Science at the American Cancer Society. She oversees approximately 40 research and study operations staff. She also has served as the Principal Investigator of the American Cancer Society Cancer Prevention Studies. And these are among the country's largest population cohort studies. And they have really influenced greatly how our understanding of some of the modifiable risk factors, what causes cancer. And I certainly use the information from her research almost every day when I talk to patients. And welcome, Dr. Patel. It's so great to have you here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. And it feels like I'm back home in some ways.
So Dr. Patel and I have known each other for quite some time. As a cancer doctor, I've been a volunteer for the American Cancer Society for over 30 years and have had the opportunity to be involved in some of the cancer research studies. The talk tonight is about cancer prevention studies, past, present, and future. And Dr. Patel, why don't you just start out telling us what is a cancer prevention study, or maybe even bigger, what is a population health study?
Yes. So the cancer prevention studies, it's, the simplest way to actually explain them is you recruit a large group of people. And by large, I mean several hundred thousands of people who are generally middle-aged, healthy. They can be children, but in this case, the cancer prevention studies focused on middle-aged adults. And we collect a wide range of information. That information.
And this would be middle-aged adults who do not have a cancer diagnosis,
exactly,
correct?
Yes. So they do not have a cancer diagnosis when they enroll in the study, but they provide lifestyle, medical, behavioral information. In our newer generation studies, they actually also provide a blood sample. And then we collect all this information. We follow everyone forward in time and continue to update that information. And inevitably, in these really large populations, individuals will unfortunately develop cancer. But we can take this information that we've collected and we can understand what influences the risk of developing or protecting or lowering your risk of developing cancer and other diseases. And then we continue to follow after a cancer diagnosis to see how we can help learn about improving outcomes after a cancer diagnosis as well.
And you mentioned that one of the innovative things about the most recent study is when we enroll, and I say we because I am a member of the study. So what year was it, Dr. Patel, that we enrolled for the CP3?
We enrolled Cancer Prevention Study 3, or the third generation study. We started nationwide back in 2006. And then we were in Iowa in different places across the state between 2010 and 2013, when we wrapped up enrollment of just over 300,000 people across the country.
So a study with 300,000 people, and I signed up to be a member of the study because I've not had a cancer diagnosis. And on the day we signed up, someone drew a tube of blood. And what that allows us to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this tube of blood then is in a biospecimen bank. And over the next however many years, if I am found to have cancer, the American Cancer Society, Dr. Patel's study group, will have known many things about my lifestyle that I will have given them information about. And they'll also have a tube of blood from when I enrolled. And there are lots of studies that are being done now to see, can you find protein or even DNA in a blood sample that might be predictive of someone developing cancer in the future, or any other factor in my blood that might, when they go back and look at it in retrospect, you can correlate with cancer?
Right.
And is CPS3, the current generation, is that the only one to have collected blood on those of us who enrolled?
So that's not the only population study in the US. It is this generation's largest. The National Cancer Institute, for instance, right now just launched a recruitment of a new study. They're trying to recruit ultimately 200,000 people. There are a few others that are coming up. Canada's enrolling for a study right now as well. And there are many of these across the globe. Of course, we want to be able to understand risk factors, lifestyle, environment, behaviors that are relevant here in the US. So having these kinds of large population studies in the US is critically important to cancer prevention and cancer control.
So the blood that was drawn when we enrolled in this study, was any of that blood looked at for any factors initially, or is it only saved and looked at if we are found to have cancer?
So we look at it a few different ways. So actually, when we first draw it, we have very strict protocols about how we separate it into parts so that we have a sample that has your DNA in it, and then we have your plasma, red blood cells. We can measure different things in different parts of your blood. So we in total have about 2.5 million vials in deep freeze, about 130 degrees Celsius, negative 130 degrees Celsius, I should say, freezers. And so from that, we've done a number of studies already. Some of those have been looking at differences between individuals who have developed a particular type of cancer versus those that haven't. But other studies are actually looking at other factors. So a really cool one that I love to talk about is we asked so much information on our surveys about people's smoking history because we know that that is a very important, if not the most important, risk factor for so many types of cancer. But we want to understand why some people can cold turkey quit, say, I'm going to stop smoking, and they stop. And other people may try upwards of 10 or more times to quit smoking and are unsuccessful. In fact, less than 10% of people are successful on their first quit attempt at quitting. So what we did is we actually took all of the survey data that we had understanding people's behaviors around trying to quit smoking, and we characterized people who were able to quit on their first try. And then we found those individuals based on their self-reported data who had a really difficult time quitting. And we're looking at the genetic differences between those two groups. Ideally, if you find something, then that gives you now a target potentially for some sort of gene or drug development that could help people be more successful in quitting. So it's really exciting to think about the fact that we may be able to use these blood samples to understand those types of genetic differences in smoking. So a lot of interesting stuff that's going on.
And one thing that's coming along in terms of blood samples is what we call liquid biopsies, and being able to identify circulating cancer DNA or other aspects of the cancer cell, so that we're not far from using a blood draw as a cancer screening. And I would imagine that you're doing some research around that as well.
Definitely. So after individuals were enrolled through 2013, as you can imagine, individuals did go on to develop cancer. So we have several thousand individuals who within a handful of years of their enrollment were diagnosed with cancer. So we can now go back and take those blood samples, and we can look at what is that circulating tumor DNA and see whether or not we can identify fragments of circulating DNA from a tumor in that blood that was collected anywhere from 1 to 5 years earlier, and work on not only identifying new ways of testing those liquid biopsy methods, but also working in partnership to validate some of the other biopsy technology that's out there. So, that's, I think, the beauty of this resource is that we have a lot of collaborations with scientists worldwide so that we can make sure that we're doing cutting edge and innovative research.
And when we talk about collecting blood samples, that has become standard practice in our participation in clinical trials. So here at MercyOne Cancer Center, we have a grant from the National Cancer Institute that I'm principal investigator on that allows us to do clinical trials in cancer research where patients with a certain cancer and certain stage of cancer might be treated in two different ways. But all of our clinical trials now include drawing some blood up front that will be stored forever and be able to be used as new tests are developed or to validate tests as we learn more about circulating tumor cells, circulating DNA, and that has become part of standard practice of doing clinical trials as well.
There's the biobanking world has become, as you said, much more commonplace, which I think is great because we can't go back in time. So, I'm just so grateful that I've gotten to be part of building this study where we actually had the foresight to collect a blood sample on everyone at the time they were enrolled. And in fact, the pandemic disrupted our plans, but we're picking them back up this year in 2022 to actually go back and collect a second sample on individuals that are willing to provide that second sample so that we can have multiple snapshots in time of things that may change in someone's blood.
So let's talk a little bit more about the cancer prevention studies that we refer to as CPS. And as you've already mentioned, there's been 3 generations. Maybe give us a sense for what an undertaking this is, the number of personnel or man hours it takes to enroll hundreds of thousands of people, to then collect data year after year, to have it put in databases and analyzed, and give us a little sense for the magnitude of the operation of doing a large population health study.
It's exhausting. I'll start by saying that, but definitely the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I've been at ACS now for 25 years, so I've been working on the second and third generation studies. Third generation built from the ground up with the help and support of many colleagues and volunteers. But at ACS, that's been the beauty for us is volunteers like you, Dr. Deming, that we were able to partner with across the country so that we had a relatively small team. There's about 40 people in our population sciences department, but we were able to train volunteers as well as staff locally across the country for the ACS to bring to life this type of enrollment. And that's really been the anchor of our population studies since the 1950s, is that partnership between our research program and our volunteer base to be able to do this effectively and efficiently. So that's probably been the most significant advantage that we had at the American Cancer Society in building these studies. We estimate that about 25,000 volunteers worked at our different enrollment sites across the country over those several years for CPS3 to help build this generation's study. In CPS2, we didn't have the same model, so we actually had 77,000 volunteers, each charged with recruiting 10 to 15 people that they knew either through work or their place of worship or their neighborhood. and they were charged with each recruiting 10 to 15 people that met a specific eligibility criteria, and then actually keep up with them and work with us for years to update their information. So those partnerships with our volunteers has been critical for us.
Doctor might want to talk.
So, Dr. Patel, we've lost a bit of your volume. I don't know if that's at your end or our end.
I'm at max volume and haven't touched it, so.
Okay. There we go. We'll fiddle a little bit with the volume here. I can hear you a bit better.
Okay, great.
And this is, and George, can you confirm that you can hear okay on the?
I think she's all right.
Okay, we're good. We're good.
Okay,
so, and you mentioned, can you imagine, like, if the University of Iowa wanted to do a nationwide study? I mean, they probably could try to get alumni from around the country to volunteer. But the American Cancer Society is over 100 years old, and the basis of the American Cancer Society as an organization is volunteers, the largest volunteer-led cancer control organization in the world. And so being able to rely on volunteers that have worked and helped disseminate information and provide access for patients to get services from the American Cancer Society, that has existed for a long, long time. And we were able to use that as part of the strategy for getting volunteers who don't have cancer to participate in the study.
And it was not only our volunteers, but then our partners as well. So for instance, there, at MercyOne Hospital, we hosted enrollments thanks to you and, helping us open those doors. So we were able to bring our partners into the fold. So we had individuals that were working the enrollments, but we had partners like MercyOne who were, giving us the space to be able to actually give people the opportunity to come and participate. So it's really been tremendous.
So let's look at some of the results historically. And I know that you've prepared for us a presentation. What did we learn with the first generation and second generation? And what are you excited about in the current generation of the study?
So what we've learned, if we go back to the 1950s, the first study, and I'll actually just switch to this slide. So that first study, Hammond Horn, those were actually the two researchers who launched the study. That it was just in men, and it was specifically to address this unexplained rise in lung cancer rates that was being observed, post the World Wars. And this study, along with the British doctor study in the UK, really provided that first forward or prospective evidence that smoking is a cause of premature death from lung cancer. And so that, though, alerted the ACS leadership at the time to this, notion that we can build partnerships with volunteers and recruit large numbers of people to understand lifestyle, behavior, and other aspects of the environment as it relates to cancer risk. And so that was the launch of the cancer prevention study, CPS1, back in the late 1950s. It was 1 million men and women, much bigger numbers than today's generation because there was no costly blood sample to be collected back then. And this study continued to add to that evidence around smoking and various types of health outcomes. Of course, the primary focus for us has always been cancer, but it also provided the first population level data and evidence on the negative health impacts associated with being overweight or obese. So this was early work done in the Cancer Prevention Study 1. Obesity and tobacco were really the main focus areas of CPS1. CPS2 became much more multi-focused. We've had several thousand publications collectively through ourselves and our collaborators out of these data on various aspects of lifestyle behavior. So continued work in smoking. In fact, we continue to be the basis of the risk estimates for every Surgeon General's report on tobacco and health since the first back in 1964. But a lot of work in nutrition and physical activity. So when I first joined ACS in the late 1990s, that was when we first really started doing a lot of work in the space of exercise and cancer prevention, and subsequently cancer outcomes as well after a diagnosis. And so that along with nutrition, environment, continued looks at obesity and smoking, different types of medications, and other comorbidities like diabetes, the link between diabetes and cancer, many, many different things to come out of CPS2. And CPS3 will continue to build on a lot of that, as well as tee us up for the next generation of research.
So the CPS1, as your slide shows, is 1959 to 1972, or when the patients were accrued. What percentage of that population, those million, are still alive?
So that actually, we stopped following them in 1972. So they were recruited actually in about 18 months. And then we followed them until 1972. But the average individual was born in the first 2 decades of the 1900s. So probably a very small percentage. In CPS2, about 55% of that population has subsequently died. And among those that are still living, the average age is about 85 years old.
And for the group that you enrolled for the CPS2, are you still collecting data on them?
So we stopped because so much of the population had died, and because they were so much older among those that are still living. We did stop active data collection, but we are still continuing to get outcomes information on them through the end of this year.
Okay. And any other findings from CPS2 that are...
So, in addition to lifestyle and behavioral factors, like I said, everything ranging from smoking, obesity, aspects of nutrition, alcohol consumption, physical activity, multivitamin and other vitamin supplement use, a wide range of different potential factors that may be related to cancer. We also did go back in the late 1990s and collect a blood sample on 40,000 people in that population, and a cheek cell or buccal cell sample on another 70,000, so that we could do some genetics work as well. And so CPS2 has actually contributed to the discovery or validation of every common mutation that we know is important in breast, prostate, and pancreatic cancer. So that is a large initiative that was actually led by the National Cancer Institute. It's called the Nci Cohort Consortium. So CPS2, along with many other population studies, we all came together, brought our data together, brought our blood samples together so that we could answer important questions with a much bigger, more powerful sample size. So there's been a lot of great work that's come out of that population.
And then you mentioned that you actually designed the CPS3, and obviously you used the information from CPS1 and CPS2 and maybe some other population studies. What were some of the novel questions that you put on the CPS3 that were not part of the information you were collecting in 1 and 2?
So we asked about things like, so I'll start with the area of physical activity, because that is something that I work on personally. but we asked about things like sidewalks and how much people use sidewalks or walk to places so that we can understand how to help message and support people to be more physically active. So if we can look at the built environment along with people's behaviors, then we can better understand where people may be active and how. We also asked about things like high intensity interval training. We asked a lot about time spent sedentary and the 24-hour day, because earlier studies really focused on that intentional exercise activity, which we know is important today for cancer prevention and outcomes for cancer survivors. But we need to understand, what about the rest of the day and the night? So we asked a lot more holistic questions about the 24-hour day. We asked questions about things like cell phone use. We asked about a lot of new types of medications that weren't available or relevant in CPS1 or CPS2. And then as we continue to update information, we're able to implement new data collection. So for instance, back in 2020, we launched in pretty rapid succession, we launched a number of different studies. And I have just a few studies that I wanted to just show you because I think it's really cool. So this is what it looked like when we finished enrolling. The darker the blue, the more enrolled. But a very large sample of just over 300,000 people. We collected about 7 teaspoons of blood. And as I mentioned, we have about 2.5 million vials in the freezer. So we're doing things like, if someone is diagnosed with certain types of cancer, we're collecting their tumor tissue. So this is, I think, something that I'm really excited about. So we're creating now a digital pathology resource. So what we've done is we're at a very high magnification, scanning in slides of their tumor tissue so that we can actually start applying things like artificial intelligence algorithms to see if we can identify patterns in the tumors that go beyond, a human eye, that what the pathologist can see. Can we find patterns of a breast cancer, for instance, that are associated with poorer prognosis of that cancer? So that's something new that we're doing. Again, going back to exercise, a lot of people want to know basic things like, what if I only have time to exercise on the weekends? Is that okay if I'm just hoarding it all and doing it all on one day of the week? So we actually are getting about 20,000 people in CPS3, which will be the largest device-based data set amassed, to be able to actually look at per second movement. When and how are people being active, so that we can start to understand how to better dose physical activity for cancer prevention.
So I understand correctly, you have sent out these gadgets, and perhaps
Yes.
the woman that has the striped dress is on her belt. Is that right?
Yeah, so they wear it. It's a research grade accelerometer, so it captures movement forward, backward, side to side, and then up and down. So it also captures how much do you sit. We hear a lot about sitting and the harmful effects of sitting. In fact, some of the work that I did more than a decade ago now was the earliest evidence on sitting time and the harmful effects of sitting too much. But again, what we don't know is, what if I break up that sitting for, say, 5 minutes every hour? I wear an Apple Watch, like I'm sure many others do, or a Fitbit that tells me to stand up every hour. Is that combating the issue of prolonged sitting? We don't know yet. So there's a lot of new questions that are relevant in the way we live today. Back in the 1950s, we didn't ask these questions because we didn't have remote controls and DVRs, and we didn't rely on dishwashers and computers. We're much more sedentary today than we were a generation ago. And we don't know whether or not we need to be doing things differently when we're not exercising. We know that we need to exercise 150 to 300 minutes a week. But we don't know what we need to be doing the rest of the time.
Yeah. And so you and I know that physical activity does relate to getting cancer. I would say, just from people I talked to, I had a pre-med student that was with me today, had no clue that there was a correlation between obesity and physical activity and developing cancer. And would you say that relationship of, and you put it in your words, but I always think about the triad of obesity and physical activity and bad nutrition, as in too many calories, that triad accounts for almost as many cancers as cigarette smoking in the United States?
Close to that many, probably 1 in 5 cancers. Okay. Although we're still learning more. So in the past, I would say 20 years, what we have learned, and these are, the World Health Organization, the American Cancer Society, the World Cancer Research Foundation, several bodies have reviewed and put out consensus reports or recommendations. 13 different types of cancer we can say there is sufficient evidence that 13 different kinds of cancer are linked to excess body weight. We can say conclusively that 7 types of cancer are linked to physical inactivity. We're continuing to add to those lists. It's remarkable that in my career alone, I remember the year before I graduated, there was one sentence in the first ever Surgeon General's report on physical activity and health, that being physically inactive may be harmful for colorectal cancer prevention. So alternatively, being physically active would be good for colon cancer prevention. Today, we know that there are 7 types of cancer for which there's sufficient evidence that physical activity is beneficial for lowering risk of those types of cancer. Then we think about after a cancer diagnosis, and it's amazing. I've been known to say, and some, think that I'm a broken record saying it, if we could figure out how to package up all of the benefits, mental and physical health, related to physical activity into a pill, we could retire tomorrow.
Yes.
It is remarkable how much of a benefit there is. Everything from the uptake or efficacy of your chemotherapy during active treatment is improved by being physically active. Reducing symptoms and side effects like fatigue or pain, lymphedema, are improved by different amounts of physical activity. There's actually a great movement through the American College of Sports Medicine, and I'd encourage any of you who are interested, and if you're a cancer survivor especially, it's called Moving Through Cancer. And they have great, what I call prescription sheets of, I'm dealing with this side effect, how much and what type of exercise do I need? And you can dose yourself so that you can see that evidence-based benefit of exercise. But there's still a lot to learn, and we're hoping to add to that list for sure through Cps3 and other studies.
Right. Do you have at your fingertips the 7 cancers that are where there is sufficient evidence to demonstrate
for physical inactivity?
For physical inactivity.
So
yes.
Breast, colon, endometrium, kidney, gastric, cardia. Oh, and I'm forgetting 2. I apologize for that. I am forgetting 2.
Okay, that's okay. We'll come back to that. But yes, so we do know conclusively that physical activity will reduce the risk of 7 types of cancer. And none of us are going to be surprised if that list doesn't grow as we gain more information. And then it'll be interesting as we try to sort out physiologically what is happening and why physical activity can be protective.
Well, and I think, as you mentioned, poor nutrition, physical inactivity, and obesity, they're all intertwined. But what's really also encouraging about the evidence as it's building is that even in the absence of weight management, so, a lot of people think, well, I'm doing all this exercise, I'm doing my 150 to 300 minutes of moderate activity, which is, equivalent to walking at about a 3 mile an hour pace or 20 minutes per mile. But I'm not losing weight, or I'm still a little bit overweight. Is that helping? Yes, it does. Actually, in the absence of weight management, we're actually seeing that even if you are a bit overweight, there's tremendous benefit to being physically active. That's separate from. So we're looking at, we know that some of it's tied in with your weight, but there are a lot of what we call independent biologic pathways that explain why physical activity is beneficial. So, I always encourage people, don't just judge the benefits of physical activity by what the scale says. Being physically active, no matter what, is of value to your overall health.
Yes. And as you pointed out, you're with the American Cancer Society, so that's really a main contribution is the cancer risk, but the other health benefits in terms of heart and diabetes and just quality of life, wellness and mental health and happiness and joy and all of those things are tied into physical
I
activity.
will say that we just recently, out of our Cps3 data, published on mental health outcomes and physical activity during the COVID pandemic. And I will say that, anecdotally, and as our research showed, being physically active is tremendous in terms of mental, your mental and physical health. So I would definitely encourage it for cancer prevention and a lot more.
Your quality of life so much better, but to know that you're actually engaged in an activity that will reduce your risk of cancer.
And it improves survival after a cancer diagnosis.
Yes.
So even if it didn't prevent your cancer, it does improve your survival after that diagnosis as well.
Just had a conversation today with a breast cancer patient who's in the midst of breast cancer treatment. And as you know, if someone in the United States is diagnosed with early stage breast cancer, that's detected on a mammogram, the cancer is not causing any symptoms. We put them on the conveyor belt of breast cancer treatment, if you will, and they go through surgery and chemotherapy and radiation therapy and hormone therapy, and they're thrown into menopause and they come out the other end cancer-free, but 85% of them will have gained 20 pounds in the process. Because the old-fashioned way of taking care of cancer is, oh, I'm so sorry you have cancer, take a nap, take some rest. People bake you cake and cookies. You're just enabled to take it easy. The new science is, I'm so sorry you have breast cancer, but this is not the time to slack off on physical activity. In fact, if you increase your physical activity while you go through cancer treatment, your side effects will be less, you'll have better outcomes, and you'll put yourself in a better shape to face the future.
Yes. Now that is the message we need to get out there, because there are many parts of the country and unfortunately, many clinicians who aren't delivering that very message, but that is absolutely the message that we need to be getting out there. And it's the one I'm constantly telling people, that if you feel like you have the strength to get up, do what you can. It may not be as much as you wanted to be able to do, but do what you can. Something is better than nothing. And then work to build yourself up.
Great. So let's go back to your slides. And do you have some additional information you want?
I wanted to just share some of the other exciting stuff that's happening as we look forward. So we just last year launched a study called the Gut Microbiome Sub-Study. And so what we're actually doing is collecting a stool sample from a large subset, a minimum of 10,000 people in CPS3, so that we can really start to understand now, again, building on what we know. So we know things like, we know the importance of limiting your consumption of red and processed meat because those increase your risk of colon and other types of cancer. We know that, the way someone may metabolize different parts of their diet differs based on the bacteria in your gut. And so it's really exciting that we can now actually do sequencing of the bacterial DNA in your gut through your stool sample. And we can characterize hundreds of thousands of different kinds of bacteria and look at what that gut microbiome looks like. We're actually this year also adding in collection of a saliva sample so that we can understand how do things start breaking down in your oral microbiome, and then what happens in your gut, and start putting that whole pathway together. So some really, really exciting research that will build on some of those earlier discoveries that we've had around nutrition and cancer especially.
Wow, that is exciting. And the more you learn about how our human body is an ecosystem that, don't quote me exactly on, but let's say the human body has 10 trillion human cells, but this human body of 10 trillion human cells may have 100 trillion virus and bacteria.
Well, exactly.
And they're not just freeloading. I mean, they are part of our ecosystem that contribute to our health.
Exactly. And we don't know how they contribute. Some are going to contribute in a good way, and others are going to contribute in a potentially harmful way. We're using the blood samples in both CPS2 and CPS3. You mentioned viruses as well. So we're actually we're doing this, what's called a multiplex panel, looking at a number of different past infections of different kinds of viruses to see what antibodies you still have and what you may have been exposed to at different points in your life, to see how those different infections and that infection history may be associated with things like blood cancers. So there's a lot of different types of things that we can do now with technology advancements, using the blood samples, using stool samples, using tumor tissue samples. So that's probably been the biggest shift from our CPS1 and CPS2 studies to CPS3, is that we've integrated this biologic data collection to complement that lifestyle and survey-based data collection of, that we've always done in the past.
Yeah, and the advances, so for example, HPV, obviously when I was in medical school in the 1970s, the relationship between HPV, the human papillomavirus, and the various cancers. I mean, we were aware of the relationship with cervix, but now the number of cancers that we know are directly related to HPV, and out of that research has come a vaccine where adolescents can be vaccinated to help prevent cancer.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much. I'm just so excited about so many things that are on the horizon, and we're continuing to build out the collection and different types of collection in the study, and also doing a lot now with technology to make our data more securely and safely accessible to other researchers. so that we can start to, one of the hardest things, as you mentioned, is, building and maintaining a study like this is, really, really difficult. And it's something that we've been successful in doing now for several generations. But how can we better share this with the scientific community to accelerate advances? Because, if we expected everyone to work in their little bubble and build their own studies, we're not serving our patients, we're not serving the public in the ways that we can and we should.
Yeah, I've heard it said that you often describe it that you have this gold mine of data, but at the American Cancer Society, you don't have enough gold miners
Exactly.
to actually extract all the useful. So you're collaborating with other research institutes. Say, hey, look at our gold mine. Can you, send a few miners here, and we'll let you into our gold mine and help us retrieve.
That's exactly it. We have close to probably, I think, around 50 different academic collaborations with investigators around the world. That infection panel that I mentioned, we're working with a group in Heidelberg, Germany on that project. We have projects with folks all over the United States, Australia, different parts of Europe. So it's really exciting that we've been able to find ways to make our resource usable to advance. I think the mission that we all, of course, have. It does not matter to me if that discovery is made within my shop or somewhere else. I will be proud that the cancer prevention studies led to the discovery and that it will help cancer patients and their families. And that's really, I think, what matters.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And speaking of excitement, I'm excited to see your next slide because we haven't previewed it, and so I was not aware of the gut microbiome aspect.
So, yep. So this is the way we send the little kit out. And, it's the one thing I should say, the silver lining in the pandemic is people spent a lot of time at home. So they were really willing to do this collection. I didn't think we'd get as good a response as we've gotten thus far.
So I have to tell you, Alpa, I don't know whether I am feel honored or feel left out that you guys haven't sent me this kit.
You will get your invite this year. Don't you worry. You will definitely get your invite. And then the two other things I just wanted to share that are really exciting that are going on in CPS3 is we launched this, what we're calling our web portal. So again, imagine, your online banking website. It's a one-stop shop to transfer money, deposit checks, pay bills, do all that stuff. We've actually built and launched a Cps3 Web Portal. So this is how we were actually able to very quickly launch data collection around COVID. So we could develop the survey and push it out through the portal, and we were able to do that. So we're continuing to grow all of our data collection through this portal. And so, as I mentioned, in conjunction with that, we also launched a daily symptom tracking app around COVID so that we can now take all this information and combine it, but we can also continue moving forward to study what the longer term health effects as it relates to cancer or other diseases may be as a result of COVID infection. And the last thing, which is very new for us, is where we've done a small pilot of 100 people, and now we're launching a larger intervention study. It's going to be a 1-year intervention. So I mentioned that, of course, we know a lot that physical activity is not only associated with higher risk, but also poor outcomes for several types of cancer. Unfortunately, as we talked about, most cancer survivors are insufficiently active because a lot of times they're told to rest and conserve their energy. So we're recruiting 400 cancer survivors within the CPS3 population, people that went on to develop cancer. And we're going to conduct a 1-year randomized trial, which is going to launch in just a few months, to see if we can deliver a social support-based a web platform for cancer survivors to help them increase their activity levels, both aerobic and strength training, and decrease their sedentary time. And if it's successful, this is something that we can then make available through digital channels to individuals across the country where they may not have an in-person resource to tap into, or are unable to go to, a cancer center or some other facility to do those types of exercise programs. So we're giving a lot of examples of things you can do around the house, how you can use soup cans as weights, and all sorts of different things to be able to help people be more active at home. So I'm really excited about this study launching in just a few months.
Yeah, that is exciting. So I really applaud you for doing that. And you're right. Many people have so many obstacles and barriers to going to a gym, but you don't have to go to a gym to get physical activity. And helping people understand how to gain physical activity, everything from using a standing desk to walking, and using a push lawnmower, and taking the stairs instead of the elevator. There's so many things that we can incorporate into our daily activity that counts as exercise.
And I think that's an important point, because so often when I'm asked, well, how much exercise do I need to get? I'm not good at running, or, I have bad knees. There's a lot of different, and people are shocked when I say moderate intensity activity is what we're aiming for. And that means for most people, that is achieved at a 3-mile-an-hour pace of walking. So if you can walk about 20 minutes per mile, you're meeting that threshold of moderate intensity activity. And if you do that for 30 minutes a day, you're fully meeting what you need. If you can get to 45 minutes, great. But 30 minutes a day puts you at 210 minutes a week. And we recommend that at the American Cancer Society, we recommend that you strive for 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity activity a week. And that becomes less daunting, I think, when people are like, oh, so I can just go for a walk? And I was like, yeah. And there's great evidence that if you grab a friend, that social support, it actually has good benefits for mental health outcomes. So, find a neighbor or friend. It also helps with accountability as well. But I tell people, find what you love, and then you'll stick with it.
Right. And a good point about the social engagement, the activities that we do through Above and Beyond Cancer and through MercyOne. I mean, after our lecture tonight, I'm going to be teaching a group cycling, and we'll have fun music, and there's fellowship and camaraderie, and that has a great benefit to our health and our well-being.
Well, I definitely, one of these days when we're safely able to resume the different mountain climbs, I'm tagging along with Above and Beyond Cancer. I'm sad I haven't been able to do that with you yet.
Well, that will be great to have you. We've got, do you have some more slides?
I don't. I just wanted to share some of what's up and coming in the study, but happy to take any questions if anyone.
Yeah, so we do have about 7 people in the live studio audience here. So questions for Dr. Patel?
That was one of my questions is, what do you see in the future, like 10 years out versus like 50 years out? What can we expect?
So did you hear the question, Dr. Patel?
Okay. So I'd say 10 years out, if I were to share what my hope would be, it would be that we have much more precision guidance for both cancer prevention and for cancer survivors in terms of managing their health after a cancer diagnosis. And what I mean by that is we're learning a lot about, for instance, the contribution of your genetics to your cancer risk. So should we tell all women to start getting mammograms at the exact same age? Or are there some women who may benefit from screening either more frequently or earlier? And how do we define who those women are because of their risk? We need to get better in terms of precision delivery of prevention as well as early detection and then treatment. We've seen a tremendous amount around personalized or precision treatment with things like immunotherapy. I see a lot of continued advancement in that space. But I'd love to see that kind of continued advancement in the space of prevention and early detection too. And I think we'll be there in 10 years.
Excellent. Other questions? Yes.
She brought up about research on people that smoke. What about, because I grew up with a lot of people smoking in my family. In fact, I'm allergic to cigarettes. And has anything been in study about those that are around with the secondhand?
Yeah. So Dr. Patel, the question has to do with secondhand, and maybe if you want to say anything about thirdhand, what is secondhand smoking? What's thirdhand smoking? And what can you say about the risks of secondhand smoking in particular?
So secondhand smoking, so being in in a shared environment where others are smoking, has been studied quite extensively in the cancer prevention studies and several other studies. And in fact, that evidence is largely what's been used to motivate a lot of our smoke-free legislation across the country, because we know that there are many harmful effects of that exposure. We're still understanding some aspects of dosing. So we know individuals based on their occupation, take, for instance, bartenders who are working in a bar where they were exposed to high levels of smoke for prolonged periods of time on a daily basis, that, there are many harmful effects of that type of level of exposure. We're still understanding, childhood exposure as well as other more what I would call transient or occasional exposure. And what the potential harms may be of that. But, there is a lot that we already do know about that secondary exposure to smoke. And we do know it's harmful, and, and continue to, with our sister organization, the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, use that research as the foundation for a lot of our smoke-free legislative work.
Great. Thank you. We have time for one more question. Yes, Boone.
I'm a survivor with lymphedema and exercising with that. What was the website you mentioned?
So we have a patient who's a cancer survivor, breast cancer, who has lymphedema, and that can interfere with some exercise. And she was interested in learning more about the website you mentioned with the sports medicine, that she'd like to look there to see whether they have any information correlating physical activity and lymphedema.
Definitely. It's called movingthroughcancer.org.
Movingthroughcancer.org.
And you'll find quite a bit of information there. It's a lot of it is broken down by specific symptom that you may be trying to manage with exercise.
Right. Well, thank you. I think we're going to bring it to a close. We definitely are going to have you back again because this is such important information. Taking care of cancer patients and helping reduce the burden of cancer is so much more than just killing cancer cells. If we can prevent cancer, we're way ahead, and if we can support those who have been diagnosed with cancer and provide a path forward for them to make sure they have the best possible outcomes and reduce the risk of a second cancer. And the information that the knowledge that we have learned because of the research that you and your colleagues have done has changed the way I practice medicine, and I think it's going to make a huge difference in reducing the burden of cancer.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And with partners like you, Dr. Deming, I have no doubt that we will continue to see tremendous progress.
Well, thank you so much. And to our audience, thanks for being with us this evening. If you want to listen to this video podcast again, or if you have friends that weren't able to join us, this will be available online to watch at your convenience on the Above and Beyond Cancer YouTube channel or the MercyOne Cancer Center website. So this has, again, been Dick Deming, Medical Director, MercyOne Cancer Center. Thank you for joining us. Please join us again next week. Bye, everybody.